Some nights, I wake to the sound of footsteps circling my house, but when I look outside, there are no footprints. Just the wind and the dirt shifting in the field where he was buried. I grew up in rural Iowa, in a town so small you could drive through it in 2 minutes without hitting a single stoplight. My family owns a farm that has been passed down for 3 generations, surrounded by cornfields that stretch to the horizon. The kind of place where secrets do not stay buried, but some should have. There was always this story whispered around town when I was a kid, about a reclusive old farmer named Thomas Greeley, who once owned the land next to ours. No one ever saw much of him. He kept to himself, never married, never hired help. The only real evidence he existed were the deliveries of feed and seed he signed for once a season. People said when he died, he left a strange request in his will. He wanted to be buried in his field, not lying down like most people, but standing up, facing east, no tombstone, just dirt and stalks growing around him. No one ever confirmed it. No obituary, no grave marker. Just this odd silence that followed any mention of him. But kids talked, rumors spread. Some said he wanted to watch over his land, even in death. Others believed something darker, like he had made some sort of deal, and standing up was part of keeping it. I never really believed any of it. Not until my cousin Josh came to stay with us the summer I turned 17. Josh was one of those kids who had no fear and way too much energy. He had heard the story of Greeley from some older kids at a bonfire and immediately became obsessed. One night, after my parents had gone to bed, he dared me to go with him into Greeley's old field. "We will find the spot," he said, "where he was buried." At first, I laughed it off, but the way the wind rustled through the dry stalks, the way the moonlight hit the field like it was glowing, it stirred something uneasy in my chest. Still, I did not want to look like a coward. We grabbed 2 flashlights and hopped the fence. The field was thick, taller than either of us, and silent except for the soft crunch of our boots on the dry ground. The air smelled like old dirt and mildew, and it got colder the deeper we went. Not just cooler cold, like the kind of chill you feel in a cellar. Josh was laughing, whispering, "Maybe he is right under us." I told him to shut up. Then we found it. A patch of ground where the corn did not grow. Just a narrow circle, maybe 5 feet across. It was not weeded. It was not sprayed. Just bare. And it felt wrong. I do not know how else to say it. Standing there made my teeth feel on edge. The flashlight in my hand began to flicker. Josh dared me to step on it. I told him no. He smirked and did it himself, stomping down hard. He laughed, said, "See? He is not coming up after me." That is when we heard it. A knock. One single knock from underneath the soil, like wood hitting wood, like someone buried in a box, and tapping to be let out. Josh froze. I remember how wide his eyes got. We did not say anything. We just ran. Neither of us spoke of that night again. He left 2 days later. Told me he was done with the farm, done with the weird stories. I agreed, but the noises started a week later. At first, it was soft. At night, just after midnight, I would hear footsteps outside my window, crunching gravel, slow and steady. Not like a deer or a raccoon. Heavier, measured, human. The first time I looked out, I saw nothing. No one, just the field swaying in the dark. But the next morning, there were prints. Not shoes, bare feet, deep, narrow, and spaced perfectly apart, circling the house. I tried to convince myself it was a prank. Maybe Josh had come back. Maybe one of the neighbors was screwing with me. Until I followed the prints. They led back to Greeley's field. Back to that circle where nothing grows. And when I stood there, just outside it, I felt that same chill crawl down my back. The flashlight I brought with me flickered again. I swear I heard breathing. Not loud, not fast, just steady, patient. That night, I heard knocking. From underneath the floorboards in my room. One knock, then another, then silence. I did not sleep. The next day, I borrowed a shovel. I do not know what I planned to do, dig up the field, prove it to myself. But when I got to the edge of the circle, I could not move. My limbs felt heavy. My skin was cold even though the sun was up. Then I saw it. Fresh soil. Like someone had clawed up through it and pressed a hand back down. 5 long marks, like grooves, curved in the dirt. I dropped the shovel and ran. I tried to stay away after that. I kept the windows locked, the lights on, and my phone charged. But the sounds continued, pacing. Every night now, circling the house, sometimes stopping under my window for long minutes. And last night, I heard him whisper. It was not a voice I knew. Not Josh, not my father or grandfather. It was old and hoarse, like dry leaves being crushed. He said my name. Twice. I am leaving. I have to, but I do not think it matters anymore, because I made a mistake. I stepped on the place where he stands, and I think that means he can follow me now. I always thought goats had strange eyes, like they were always watching something just past your shoulder. But the morning I saw my own reflection in one of them, and it blinked while I did not, stopped thinking it was just imagination. I live on a quiet farm in upstate New York that has been in my family for generations. It is not a commercial operation, just a few chickens, a vegetable garden, and a small barn with 5 goats that I inherited along with the property when my uncle passed away. He was a recluse, the type who kept to himself, and the barn was always his domain. When I moved in, the house needed repairs, but the barn looked as if he had been keeping it in perfect condition, almost obsessively. The goats were strange from the start, quiet, too quiet. They never made the usual bleats or noises I remembered from childhood visits. They would just stand there, watching me, every single one of them, as if they were waiting. I tried not to let it bother me. They were animals after all. Maybe just a little weird because they were used to my uncle and not me. One morning, just after sunrise, I was doing the usual feeding rounds. The fog had not yet lifted from the field, and everything had that cold, damp stillness that only early morning can bring. As I stepped into the barn, the boards creaked under my boots, and the faint smell of hay, soil, and something sour clung to the air. The goats were already awake, standing completely still in their stalls, not eating, not moving, just staring. That is when I saw it. I was pouring feed into the trough when one of them, this big black goat with pale yellow eyes, tilted its head slightly. I looked directly at it. Its eye reflected my face, clear as a mirror. Except I did not blink, but it did. My face. Inside its eye, blinking. I dropped the feed bucket. It clattered against the wooden floor, and the sound startled the other goats, but not the black one. It just kept staring. I stepped back slowly, my heart pounding in my chest. I told myself it was just a trick of the light, maybe some distortion, maybe a stress reaction. I had been working long hours fixing up the house. Maybe my mind was just playing games with me. But things did not stop there. That night, I could not sleep. The wind howled outside, and something about the house felt off, like it was slightly out of alignment. Around 2 a.m., I heard something creaking out by the barn. I tried to ignore it, but the sound continued slow, heavy footsteps on the boards outside. I grabbed a flashlight and walked out to check. The wind had picked up, and the trees swayed like giants under moonlight. When I reached the barn, the door was slightly open. I knew I had shut it tight earlier that evening. Inside, it was pitch black. I turned on the flashlight. The goats were all facing the door. Every single one of them. Their eyes reflected the beam like marbles. The black goat was right at the front. Its eyes caught the light, and there it was again. My reflection. Only this time, the expression looking back at me was not mine. It was smiling. I stumbled backward, dropped the flashlight, and slammed the barn door shut. I locked it and ran back to the house. I did not sleep that night. The next day, I called a local vet to check the goats. Maybe there was some neurological issue. Maybe something about their eyes. The vet arrived, did a full inspection, and said there was nothing physically wrong. In fact, she said they were some of the healthiest goats she had seen in years. But when she was leaving, she stopped at the porch and turned to me. "Just curious," she said. "Where did your uncle get those goats? They are unusual." I told her I had no idea. He had never talked much. That evening, I decided to go through the attic. I was looking for anything, papers, journals, receipts, that might explain where the goats came from. After a few hours of digging through dust-covered boxes, I found a small leather-bound notebook tucked inside an old feed sack. It belonged to my uncle. The entries were sparse, but one page stood out. The handwriting was shakier, like it had been written under stress. They watch me sleep. I see myself in them now. I do not know if I brought them here or if they found me. I think one of them is me. I feel less like myself every day. I do not think I will last much longer. I slammed the book shut and nearly dropped it. My hands were shaking. I went to the bathroom to splash water on my face. When I looked in the mirror, I hesitated. Something in my reflection felt wrong. Familiar, but not entirely mine. That night, I did not go near the barn. I locked every door and window. I even pulled the shades. Still, I could hear movement outside. Hoofbeats, not running, pacing, over and over again around the house. I peeked out the window. In the moonlight, I saw the black goat standing at the edge of the field. It was staring directly at the house. Its eyes glowed faintly. The next morning, I made arrangements to sell the farm. I could not stay. Something was wrong, deeply wrong, and it was not just in my head. But before I left, I went back to the barn one last time. The black goat was gone. There was no sign of it. No hoof prints, no broken fence, no tracks. But when I looked in the other goat's eyes, I saw something new. My reflection was still there. And this time, it winked at me. I did not blink. The first time I knocked on the barn wall, just to prove there was nothing there. I heard 3 knocks back, and something whispered my name. When my wife and I moved out to the country, we were looking for peace, space, quiet, a break from city noise and pressure. The farmhouse we found was exactly what we wanted. Rustic, secluded, surrounded by woods, with an old red barn that looked like it hadn't seen animals in decades. It had character. That's what we told ourselves. The house was solid. The barn? A little rough. The roof sagged in the back, and the boards creaked even in a light breeze. But I liked that. It felt authentic, historical. The previous owners said they hadn't used the barn in years, aside from storing old tools and firewood. The first few nights on the property were peaceful. The silence was so deep, it almost made your ears ring. But around the 5th night, I started noticing sounds coming from the barn after dark. Faint knocking, light, like tapping. Not constant, just random. I chalked it up to wind, or maybe mice. The place was old, after all. Then came the whispering. It was maybe 11 p.m. I was outside smoking on the porch, about to head in, when I heard it. A voice, not loud, but clear enough to freeze me mid-step. It was coming from the barn. I stood there, holding my breath. It was too soft to make out words. Just a low murmur, like someone speaking from behind a wall or inside one. I told myself it was probably the wind pushing through a crack, or maybe 2 animals rustling around. The next morning, I checked inside. Nothing but dust, cobwebs, and some old shells. Still, I felt uneasy. A few nights later, I decided to prove to myself there was nothing to worry about. I brought a flashlight and walked out to the barn around midnight. The boards groaned under my boots. The air was cooler and they're musty, like old hay and damp wood. I stood in the middle of the barn, aimed my flashlight at the back wall, and waited. Nothing. I said out loud, half joking, "If something's in here, give me a sign." I knocked on the wall 3 times. Tap, tap. I didn't expect anything. But then, from inside the wall, came 3 knocks back, slower, heavier. Thud, dot, 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 dot. I backed up, heart pounding, suddenly aware of how quiet everything had gotten outside. No crickets, no breeze, just me and the wall. Then came the whisper. Daniel, that's my name. I didn't tell it my name. I ran. I didn't tell my wife right away. She was already uneasy being out there in the middle of nowhere. The next day, I convinced myself it was just my imagination or maybe some prank from a local kid. But I checked every inch of that wall. There was no space for anyone to hide inside it. No loose panels, no holes. A few nights later, I heard it again, knocking, whispering, always between midnight and 2 a.m. always, from the same wall. I tried ignoring it. I even stopped going outside at night. But then it escalated. It started knocking on its own. 5 knocks one night, 7 the next. And the whispers got louder, closer. My name again, thrown out slowly like a threat. Daniel. One night, I finally broke. I grabbed a crowbar and a lantern and stormed out to the barn. I was done playing games. I was going to rip open that wall and find whatever animal, person, or trick was inside. It was around 1:30 a.m. The barn was freezing, even in August. My breath came out in puffs. I swung the crowbar at the boards near the knocks. The wood cracked and splintered, revealing nothing. Behind the wall was a small hollow space. Just dirt and cobwebs. No wiring, no raccoons, no secret room. I reached inside, feeling around. That's when I touched something cold. Cold and soft, like skin. I yanked my hand back, heart in my throat. I backed away, knocking over the lantern, which flickered and dimmed, but stayed lit. I stared at the wall. The knocking had stopped. Then, from inside the barn, not the wall, came the whisper. Right behind me. You opened it. I turned and ran, not even bothering to shut the barn door behind me. That was a month ago. We don't go near the barn anymore. I padlocked it and boarded up the entrance. But every night, I still hear it knocking. Sometimes it's on the barn. Sometimes it's on the side of the house. And 2 nights ago, it knocked on our bedroom wall. We live alone. No neighbors. No animals. Last night, my wife woke me up in the middle of the night. She was shaking, crying. She said she heard something whisper her name from the closet. I didn't ask what it said after that. I think I already know. At first, we thought one of the neighbors had played a prank. But when the Scarecrow moved 10 feet closer to the house, overnight without anyone hearing a thing, we realized it wasn't a joke. My parents bought the farmhouse when I was 14. They called it a quiet place to start over after my dad lost his job and my mom wanted out of the city. The property was about 40 acres of land, most of it overgrown pasture, and a small patch of crops the last owner left behind. The house itself was old, creaky, and surrounded by flat fields in every direction. It was peaceful, sure, but also eerily empty, especially at night. The first time we saw the Scarecrow was about a week after we moved in. My dad noticed it while we were eating breakfast. I remember how he stopped chewing mid-bite and squinted out the window above the sink. "That there yesterday?" he asked. We all turned to look. Maybe 50 yards out, in the middle of a weed-choked field, stood a scarecrow. It was standard-looking enough. Flannel shirt, straw poking out of the sleeves, faded overalls, and a burlap sack for a head. But none of us remembered putting it there. My mom assumed the last owner had left it behind, though we hadn't seen it when we toured the property. My dad muttered something about not liking junk in the field and said he'd take it down later. He didn't. The next morning, it was closer. It had moved maybe 10 or 15 feet toward the house, standing near the edge of a dying corn row. We all noticed it at breakfast again. My dad swore up and down he hadn't touched it. Mom laughed it off, said maybe the wind had pushed it or it fell, and he stood it up in a different spot without realizing. But it hadn't fallen. It was standing, perfectly upright, arms still outstretched, still facing the house. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept glancing out my window, expecting to see it at the edge of the yard. But it was too dark. The fields past the fence were pitch black. The next morning, it was at the fence line. Now we were all unsettled. My dad tried to rationalize it, said maybe someone was messing with us. Maybe some local kids were trespassing at night. He even walked out there to check for footprints, but found nothing. No drag marks, no shoe prints. Just the scarecrow, standing perfectly still, arms wide open, head tilted ever so slightly toward the house. He went to grab it, to pull it down, but the second he touched it, he froze. I watched him from the porch. He stared at the thing for a full minute before turning around and walking back, empty-handed. I asked him what was wrong. His face was pale. "It's wired into the ground," he said quietly, real deep. Not normal. He wouldn't say anything more. That night, I woke up to a sound I still can't quite explain. It was like a creaking hinge mixed with dry leaves rustling. Rhythmic, slow, almost careful. I got out of bed and looked through the window. It took my eyes a few seconds to adjust. And there it was, standing in the backyard now, 20 feet from the house, closer than ever. I backed away from the window. My heart was pounding so hard, I could feel it in my throat. I wanted to scream, wake up my parents, do something, but I couldn't move. The next morning, the scarecrow was gone. At least, that's what we thought until we found it propped against the barn. Closer, always closer, like it was learning the property, like it was exploring. My dad finally snapped. He got in his truck, tied a chain to the scarecrow's post, and dragged the whole thing out to the back of the field. He threw it in a fire pit, doused it in gas, and lit it. We watched the flames from the porch. I remember how quiet it was. No birds, no wind, just the crackling fire. The next morning, it was back, in the exact same spot as before, but now it looked different. The clothes were the same, but the head was no longer burlap. It looked like cloth wrapped in plastic, tightly wound, and there was something underneath the wrappings, something angular, almost face-like. We didn't eat breakfast that morning. My parents started sleeping with the lights on. We locked every door, every window. I kept my curtains shut, but I could still feel it out there, standing in the dark, watching. Then came the knocking, soft, from the back door. Around 3:13 a.m., my dad ran down with his shotgun, but there was nothing there, just the door swinging slightly open. That was the first night we heard it whisper, low, gravelly, almost like wind through a vent. "Let me in." We left the next morning, didn't pack, didn't sell the place, just got in the truck and drove until we hit the next county. My parents bought a condo in a busy suburb. No fields, no open land. I haven't been back. But last week, I got a letter in the mail. No return address, just a photo. The scarecrow, standing on the edge of a sidewalk, in a neighborhood that looked a lot like ours. Closer than ever. Some nights, The corn doesn't just sway in the wind, it shifts like something's walking through it. I used to think it was coyotes until I saw something stand up and look back at me. I grew up on a farm in southern Illinois, surrounded by miles of fields and barely a neighbor in sight. My grandfather owned the land. He was a quiet man, tough and weathered, the type who never believed in ghosts or God, but had rules like they came straight from the Bible. The most important one? Don't go in the cornfield after sundown, ever. I asked him why once. He just stared out the kitchen window at the rustling stalks and said, "Things walk in there after dark, and they ain't people." Then he changed the subject like he never said it. I thought it was just an old man's way of keeping a kid from getting lost or hurt. So for years, I followed that rule, even after he passed and the farm was left to my mom, then eventually to me. This happened last summer. I had gone back to the farm for a few weeks to help out while the workers rotated equipment for harvest season. It was one of those July nights where the sky stays a deep shade of blue even after 9 p.m. I was out on the porch, drinking a beer, trying to cool off from the heat that clung to your skin like wet clothes. That's when I noticed it. The cornfield. It was moving. Now, wind in a cornfield's not unusual. You've probably seen it gentle waves running across the tops of stalks like a golden sea. But this was different. It wasn't wind. It was movement, localized, and it was coming from deep in the field. Almost like something was pacing between the rows. I stood up and squinted. The porch light behind me cast a dull amber glow over the dirt path, but the rest of the field faded into a blue-black shadow. I couldn't see much, just the shifting of stalks, but the hairs on my arms stood up. It wasn't the wind. There was no sound, no rustling, just movement. Then I saw it. Something tall rose up from the corn. I don't mean a deer. I mean tall at least 7 feet, maybe more. It wasn't human-shaped either. Slender, yes, but unnatural. I couldn't make out details, just the silhouette, lit faintly by moonlight. It moved awkwardly, like it wasn't used to standing. It stared at me, or at least it faced me. Then it sank slowly back into the rows. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I went out to that part of the field. Nothing. No flattened rows, no footprints, not even snapped stalks. You think I imagined it, except I found something at the edge of the field near the irrigation line. A single long strand of something like black, wiry hair. It was coarse, brittle, almost burnt. That night, I locked every door and window, pulled the shades, and stayed inside. Still, around 1 a.m., I heard the creaking of the porch boards, slow, steady, like someone heavy was walking across them. I didn't look. The next few nights were quiet, almost too quiet. No animals making noise, no bugs. Even the cicadas were silent. Every evening, I swore I could see that part of the corn shifting again, like something was waiting. I should have left then. I thought about it, but this was my family's land. I wasn't about to be scared off by a shadow. So I made a mistake. I went into the cornfield. Not far, just a few yards. I brought a flashlight and a knife. I told myself I'd just prove it was nothing. Maybe there was an animal nest. Maybe some freak weather was playing tricks on me. The air inside the field was wrong. It was cooler, heavier. The sweet smell of the corn was gone, replaced by something earthy and sour. The light from my flashlight barely reached more than a few rows ahead. Everything felt tight, like the corn was pressing in. Then I heard it. Footsteps, not mine. Too slow, too heavy, and they were getting closer. I spun around, shining the light in every direction, but I couldn't see anything. The rows just rustled quietly, like they were breathing. Then I heard it speak, low, hoarse, like wind dragging across gravel. Boy, that's all it said, just that word. My blood turned cold. I ran. I don't remember how I got out, only that I didn't stop until I slammed the screen door behind me and dropped the flashlight. That night, I heard the corn move again. Only this time, it reached the edge of the yard. Then the porch boards creaked. Then, nothing. In the morning, I found tracks. Not boot prints. Not animal tracks either. Just long, deep drags through the dirt. Like something had been pulled or had slithered across the ground. I left the farm the next day. I didn't tell anyone. Not my mom, not my friends. I told myself I imagined it, that stress and grief and heat had gotten to me. But last week, I got a photo from one of the workers. A joke, he said. He found a scarecrow out in the east field. Only we don't use scarecrows. Haven't in years. We never needed them. In the photo, there's something tall standing in the corn, and its head is turned toward the camera. Toward me.